Good afternoon, Eastern Washington. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from the capital of free Washington and soon-to-be Liberty State, Spokane Valley. Brought to you once again by the Committee to Elect Matt Shea, Republican, and the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news. It's not about right or left. It's about right and wrong. About our hope being not in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. And about Ephesians 2:5-6, God made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. And raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Now, I've been talking a little bit about A.W. Tozer here the last few shows and reading that quote. But the part of the quote that really gets me is talking about men that will not be forced to do things by the squeeze of circumstances. Their only compulsion will come from within or from above. And that this kind of freedom is necessary if we are to have prophets in our pulpits instead of mascots. I want to talk a little bit today about kind of where we're at with the right to bear arms, freedom of speech. And there's some people out there recently, I've been reading articles and people are saying it's dumb to have a rally. You're not going to change the system. It's dumb. And I think that they're missing the point behind rallying people together. When you rally people together, you know you're not alone. When you rally people together, you connect people that might not have otherwise met. When you rally people together, it shows strength to the opposing side. When you rally people together, you're actually exercising a right protected by the First Amendment. The right to peaceably assemble. Also to petition for a redress of grievances. And it's important to understand that the First Amendment exists so that the others are protected by debate. And that eventually, if that amendment is attacked, the Second Amendment exists to protect the other amendments and to protect the rights that are protected by those amendments. And there is this group of people out there that they believe that you can just go about your own life and you're going to deal with something when it just comes to a head. Yeah, that's all you're going to, you just don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to do anything ahead of time. You're not going to change the system. You're going to deal with it when it comes to a head. And the problem with that mentality is that you're going to be all by yourself at that point. And you're going to get picked off by the bureaucracy because you haven't established those relationships and you haven't stood up to be known. And to declare your principles. And there's an interesting missing piece in this argument that, you should just let things go. They'll come to a head when they come to a head. We're called upon to love our neighbor. And it was interesting. I was reading in Leviticus 19, last night actually. And it talks about what loving your neighbor actually means. And it talks about rebuking your neighbor so that you are not a party to your neighbor's guilt. So by staying silent, you end up being the people talked about in Romans 1:32 that allowed things around them to happen so that they did become part of that guilt, just like Leviticus was talking about as well. Old and New Testament, both same. And It's important to understand, too, that we're trying to restore a system. And that sometimes we can't fix the existing paradigm, but we sure can create a new paradigm, which renders the old one obsolete. Now, I want to be very careful there because the Marxists say something a little similar, but it's not exact. Because we recognize that there are certain things in our system that are true. They're immutable. They continue on forever, just as they were true and correct 150, 250, 350 years ago. They're true and correct today. And those things are worth preserving and continuing. The paradigm, the view, the structures, the way things are done, that can be changed to a new paradigm. But that old truth remains. That old truth is preserved. And that's a key distinction between what the Marxists advocate for and what we advocate for. Because the Marxists don't admit truth, except for their own truth or the truth of their group that would be leading it, their oligarchs. And it is an oligarchy. It's a group of people trying to lord over everybody else. And so I look at that in a little bit different way. And I get a little perturbed when people say, oh, it's a waste of time. It's not a waste of time to protect. It's not a waste of time to come together. It's not a waste of time to rebuke those in our society who are headed down the wrong path and are willing to hurt people to do it. And this gets back to men and what A.W. Tozer was talking about. They will not be forced to do things by the squeeze of circumstances. Their only compulsion will come from within or from above. It'll come from the truth. From the truth. And the truth calls us to be out there and to act and to protect. And I submit to you, it is the mentality of, oh, we'll just wait till things come to a head, then we'll deal with it, that has resulted in all of the problems, or the majority of the problems that we're seeing in society today. And it's up to us to turn that around. It's up to us to make that happen. It's up to us to show up. And for those of us that are Christians listening to this program today, it's up to us to show up so that the Holy Spirit can work through us and be that light that is not hidden under a bushel basket, but is set on top of a hill for all to see all the way around, as a beacon of hope and freedom. That is inherently American. It's also inherently Christian. And it's what we're called to do. And that brings us to your daily intelligence briefing. On the international front, okay, wow. Aside from World War III not happening, I mean, so some interesting things occurred, and it really seemed to me that there must have been some back-channel discussions occurring. You have U.S. forces on the ground in Syria opposite the Turkish lines. You had French forces on the ground in Syria opposite the Turkish lines. You had a joint UK, US, French strike on these supposed chemical weapons linked facilities. And the Russians didn't do anything. But you got to understand why. You got to understand why. There is a tactic that the Soviets use, Maskirovka, or the little masquerade, okay, deception upon deception. And there is also something that they strategically do, and that is to not use weapon systems unless they absolutely have to, especially if they're new weapon systems that they don't want to give away what the capabilities are. And their new air defense systems that are there in Syria, they did not use them, and that's why. They didn't want the United States to know the capabilities of those systems. But also, we need to be very, very, very careful, especially conservatives. There are some people who are saying, hey, was this a false flag? Well, you know what? Honestly, it doesn't make sense for Assad to do this. So, yeah, it probably was a false flag. But the question is, was it the Russians that did it, or was it our side that allowed it to happen? That's the question that's being debated right now. And the point is this: you don't know the Soviets until you understand Maskirovka. You understand the masquerade, the deception. And the Soviets would deceive upon deceive. And so now in the modern Russian Federation, people somehow think that tactic has just gone away, and it has not. General Mihai Pachipa, I've mentioned him many times on this show in his book Disinformation. It is more than just disinformation. The Russians would actually send units forward as part of a deception, and not one person in that unit knew they were part of a deception. The Russians would create double agents. In the old KGB tactics, they would create double agents who would be, for example, in a militia in the Middle East, and they would turn that person, and then that person would do something to try to provoke. But it would look like the militia that was aligned with the other side that did it. So you've got to understand that the deception can be on deception, can be on deception, can be on deception. And that it is possible that the Russians, using proxies in what would ostensibly be U.S.-backed forces, could have created something. Or vice versa. But in particular, the Russians use this tactic and technique quite a bit. And it's interesting that the United States military very rarely teaches deception much anymore in the actual armed forces. I'm talking like the Army, the ground forces. And they do, and obviously special forces and some other things. But my point is they institutionalize this stuff. So when you're looking at these things that are happening in Syria, don't just buy into a particular narrative, and especially from Russia Today or from CNBC. Because unless you've seen the physical intelligence yourself, there's a chance that this could be one great deception upon deception upon deception. So there's a bunch of people out there that think they're really solidly right on both sides. Look, you don't know. You just don't know. The Russians could have turned a proxy in U.S.-backed forces, and then they leaked chemical weapons to make it look like they were staging it. The United States was staging it. The Russians could have done it overtly. They could have done it without ever telling Assad. United States forces could have done it on their back forces could have done it on their own accord. I mean, there's just so many different possibilities out there. And what's more important, I believe, is to look at what the geostrategic result is going to be of this stuff. That's where we should be paying attention. And that brings me to something interesting. Coming from a Debka file, quote, escalating war of words pushes IDF and Revolutionary Guards closer to clash in Syria. Okay? Specifically, the IDF revealed drone bases in Syria that are run by Iran. And so what we're seeing geostrategically is we're seeing a setup for a clash between Israel and Iran. And apparently, the Al-Quds chief, General Soleimani, is leading preparations for the first direct Iranian assault on Israel, not just by proxy. And that Iranian Air Force units in Syria are gearing up for the attack and mobilizing. Okay. This is what we need to pay attention to. Because the Israelis did attack bases in Syria, and specifically on April 9th. It was a T4 base there. And the Iranians are very likely becoming Russian proxies for this. And now Moscow is going to be giving Syria their S-300 air defense missiles. It's very interesting. So now these missiles that they held back, they're going to be giving it to them. Well, why? Well, because the Israeli Air Force, ostensibly. So what we're seeing shape up now is a clash between the IDF and the Revolutionary Guards. That's what we're seeing shape up. Who benefits out of that? Those are the questions we need to be asking. Because that gives us an idea of what was really happening on the ground behind this chemical attack that occurred. All right, let's move next to something very interesting in Korea. Apparently, very high-level talks. Makes it sound like Trump actually talked to North Korea's leader. But South Korea and North Korea are supposedly going to be entering peace talks or gearing up for peace talks to end the war there. So we're seeing some kind of dramatic things occur. It's also interesting, too, that the Chinese have an aircraft carrier group in the South China Sea along with the United States. It's interesting, the Chinese, I was reading a paper about this recently, the Chinese are actually starting to shrink some parts of their army. Because right now, there's no way they have enough Navy to project their army anywhere, really. But apparently they are shrinking the size of their army so they can begin projecting power around the world. And the first part of that projection of power is having this aircraft carrier group. So I guess we'll see how these peace talks go. But flashpoints all over the world. Very interesting times. Also, on the national front, hey, it's tax day. Yay. Yeah. Does anybody like tax day? Well, I'll bring up a quote that is very important for us to understand in its proper context, because a lot of times it's taken out of context. And it says this: an unlimited power to tax involves necessarily a power to destroy, because there is a limit beyond which no institution and no property can bear taxation. John Marshall, 1819. You think the Founding Fathers knew what was coming? Now, tax day, think about how much time is wasted preparing taxes and figuring out exemptions and getting receipts together and on and on and on, enough to put a dog to sleep. As my dog fell asleep. But think about this. It's not just the amount of taxes you're paying, it's also how much time you're putting into this. Could you imagine if we actually passed what everybody's tried to advocate for the last 50 years in like one line, or better yet, abolish the income tax altogether? Could you imagine how much private capital would be available for all kinds of things? What would you do? I want you to think about this. This is a little mental exercise. I want you to think about what would you do with an extra $1,000 a month in your paycheck? What would you do with an extra $10,000 a year in your paycheck? An extra $20,000, an extra $30,000, an extra $50,000. What would you do? And that, those things you're imagining right now, I could help some people out, could buy that new car we've been wanting for a decade. Think about that. Now think about the fact that there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the current system, and that we should be able to keep more of our wealth, and that there is inefficiency in government that could be eliminated. Think about it. Also on the national front, swarm drones. You heard me right. Swarm drones actually make their official debut on the Pentagon website. And if you haven't seen the demonstration of this, it's at stripes.com. It's pretty freaky. Okay, they have these little pods on the bottom of jet fighters that drop these swarm drones out, and then they go everywhere. And it shows it on the, I don't want to ruin it too much, but remember, this was so-called a conspiracy theory years ago. You know, there's swarm drones for you. It's real. It's here. And once again, the people that said it would happen were correct. And so evaluate your news sources. The ones that try to poo-poo that stuff and they're wrong, don't look at them anymore, because they're wrong about a lot of other stuff. They're trying to mislead you and keep you quiet, keep you docile. Also on the national front, with all the gun confiscation talk, sales are up. But it's not just the right to bear arms they're going after. They're going after the First Amendment. In California, a state senator introducing a bill that before you publish, you must have all your facts approved, of course, by the Benevolent Commission on Truth, right? Just like the, former Soviet Union, Pravda. Also on the national front, Jim Rickards, renowned former CIA economic analyst, talking about the fact that at the end of April, early May, maybe later, that the IMF is going to switch to a digital cryptocurrency with the special drawing rights, essentially as a world currency. The basket of currencies that's already in Basel, Switzerland would now be a cryptocurrency. Potentially, and we talked about this on the show here about 2-3 years ago, where China was looking at going to the SDR versus the petrodollar and held off doing that. Well, this might actually be the switch. And if it happens where the world goes away from the petrodollar, that will have a dramatic impact on our economy. Also on the national front, do we really have privacy anymore? That's an excellent question. A lot of people argue no. A lot of people have been asking, Matt, well, what do I do? And I gave you some examples of text messages and email applications that you can use. So text apps like Signal and Wire, email applications like Proton Mail and Unseen Mail. But people also ask, what about web browsing? Well, I've done a lot of research on this and really kind of tested some systems out. I used to use StartMail quite a bit. But DuckDuckGo, you heard that right, DuckDuckGo, is not only private, it seems to be a lot more accurate. And you don't get like when you go on Google, you'll get the ranking, you'll get their top 10 or 20 or whatever. DuckDuckGo doesn't do that. It gives you what you're actually searching for. It's actually quite a good search engine. So that's one way to secure your web browsing. Another way to secure your web browsing is to use Firefox, okay? Firefox, especially on Apple, is very good. And on Firefox, you can go to the Tools menu and click on Add-ons, and you can actually put some other add-ons on there to protect your privacy. One of those is HTTPS Everywhere. HTTPS Everywhere. And that helps you to stay on secure sites. Another is called Privacy Badger. It protects you from trackers as you search the web. Another is called Decentral Eyes, and it's eyes as in EYES. Then you have DuckDuckGo actually has Privacy Essentials too that you can add. And then there's also AdBlock Plus. Now, I'm going to be publishing, I want to publish an article about this, has this all kind of comprehensive for you, because this isn't perfect, folks, but it really, really does help with your privacy. And again, if you can't do anything else, you can't remember anything I just said, remember DuckDuckGo and at least get going on that, and then get AdBlock Plus. Some people argue uBlock is better, but AdBlock Plus is what I go with. A lot of people are using it and satisfied with it, and I think it works pretty well. So if you do that, pretty simple, just download, get your add-ons and on your Firefox browser, and you're good. It's not this big complicated thing that some people might make it out to be. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. Also want to mention, too, I talked about it being tax day. It was it's not really funny, but the IRS filing system, the online filing system, of course, crashed today, right? WorldNet Daily has a story. Ironic, I don't know. Just goes to show you we don't need it. We should get rid of it. Also on the national front, I want to talk very briefly about Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit against the FBI to obtain information about whether fired director James Comey is getting special treatment from the agency. And the reason is because he illegally took and then leaked material. Understand what I just said. He illegally took and then leaked material and then has used those ill-gotten documents in his new book. And I think it's about time somebody held him accountable. Gracious. I mean, what? It seems like they never get held accountable. And I want to mention one other thing. I forgot to mention this up at the international front. Venezuela, we haven't talked about that in a while. But starvation, suicides have increased dramatically under their hyperinflation. Prices have increased by 67% in March, 453% in the first quarter of this year, and 8,870, you heard that number right, 8,878% over the last year, according to the New American. And still people saying, no, we just haven't done socialism right here in America. Yeah, you kind of lost that argument, I think. Totally. All right. Let's go to the local front. Some events coming up. Red Pill Expo, once again, coming up here June 21st through 23rd here in Spokane, down at the Convention Center downtown. A lot of speakers. Yours truly going to be there as well. Also coming up, the Freedom Project with Dr. Duke Pesta, coming up 3 o'clock May 5th. 3 o'clock May 5th at Center Place out in Spokane Valley. If you want to learn about the crisis in American education and the solutions, that's the key part of it, the solutions, Dr. Duke Pesta is going to be giving those to you May 5th, 3 o'clock, Center Place, Spokane Valley. This weekend, March for Our Rights, Saturday, 11 o'clock, April 21st, Franklin Park here in Spokane. And there's a lot of people that I've already heard that are going to be there. This, again, is one of those days we could come together and say, no, not on our watch. Exercise our First Amendment rights, or our First Amendment rights that are protected by the First Amendment. and really get people out and find out, hey, look, I'm not alone. Here are the other people that are there, and they're thinking along the same lines I am. You get to meet some great speakers. And then you get to go home with some solutions about how in your community you can protect the right to bear arms. Also, this Saturday, I believe starting at 5 o'clock, down at the Red Lion in Tri-Cities, is the Franklin County Lincoln Day Dinner. And I'm going to be down there speaking as well. So if you're down there in the Tri-Cities, take a look at it. I'm going to be posting some stuff on that here in the next day or two. But again, it's going to be this Saturday. I think it starts at 5 officially at the Red Lion in Tri-Cities. And that's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Please pray. Go to Facebook/Patriot Radio US, like the page, and please pray for the show and all of the people that are making this happen, from my good friend Jim, who does the online postings and the scheduling, to my good friend Renee, who runs Point on a lot of the volunteer stuff, and Joe, who's the engineer in the studio. All those folks, pray for them all. They do a great job. And remember, too, that this is a listener-supported show. You can always go to voteshea.com and donate and help us stay on the air with this message of freedom and liberty throughout all of eastern Washington, northeast Oregon, and northern Idaho. Well, it's my pleasure today to introduce my guest, the president of Understanding the Threat, John Guandolo. We've had him on before. It's got a lot to talk about. There's a lot happening in the world right now. John, thanks for being on Patriot Radio once again, my friend.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, looks like we have not got it switched over yet, so I am going to talk very briefly then about a couple things. First, the Southern Poverty...
He's on.
He is. Good. John, can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome back to Patriot Radio, my friend. I just gave the introduction, so how are things going for you? How are things going for Understanding the Threat?
Well, it's going well. It is a battle, but we are in a war, so we expect battles. I am a Marine. That's what we expect to do in war, and we're not going to quit till the battle's over.
So, can you give us, the listeners, a little bit of an idea under the Trump administration? How have things kind of changed, and how have they stayed the same as far as understanding the threat, and especially the radical Islamic influence in the United States of America?
Well, couple things that I think are important for your listeners, especially as we try to compare and contrast, which I'm a little hesitant to do, and here's why. But I'm going to do it because you asked. Since 9/11, and this is for people that don't follow Understanding the Threat, our U.S. warfighting doctrine says when we analyze a threat, we begin with how the enemy identifies themselves and why they're fighting. And that's where we start the analysis. Since 9/11 until today, we still haven't done that. 100% of this enemy say they're Muslims waging jihad to establish an Islamic State under Sharia. That's what Al-Qaeda says. It's what ISIS says. The Islamic State says. It's what Hamas, Hezbollah say. It's what Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf. It's what the Muslim Brotherhood says in their bylaws. It's what Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaat-e-Islami, the other Islamic movements say. And it's what the nation states, the Islamic nation states, have put into official agreements that they've served to the United Nations. And I'm specifically talking about something called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, where the leaders of the Muslim nations served that document after they agreed on it in 1993. And it says that the only source of reference for human rights in the entire Islamic world is Sharia. And Sharia, 100% of all authoritative Sharia, mandates homosexuals be killed, apostates be killed. It requires war against the non-Muslim community until they either convert or submit to Islamic law. There's no version of Sharia that's not that. The problem is, since 9/11, is we've been either scared, unwilling, politically weak to actually just speak truth about it. And when you speak truth about it, contrary to what critics would say, you're not condemning everyone who self-identifies as a Muslim, because there are Muslims who say, and I'm going to take them at their word, they don't want Sharia. They don't want to adhere to Sharia, but there's no version of Islam that says that. So somebody, as an FBI agent, I worked with people who were Muslim, and they were not Sharia-adherent Muslims, but they knew how to look like Sharia-adherent Muslims, and they would go into areas in very dangerous situations, and they did very courageous things for the United States. And I think in order to have an honest discussion about real national security threats so as to create real strategies to win the war, that has to be done. You have to speak about what's the true threat, and you begin with who they say they are and why they're fighting. Under Mr. Trump's administration, a few positive notes. They stopped having at the State Department, the White House, the iftar dinners after Ramadan. And the reason why that's positive, because those were run by the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and should have never been held at anywhere in the government, but they were until this past year. Under Mr. Kelly, when he was at the Homeland Security, he cut off a grant to the Muslim Brotherhood's Muslim Public Affairs Council for over $500,000 annually. So we were funding our enemies. This is just one example of $500,000, and they cut that off because they were able to identify the Muslim Public Affairs Council as a problem and a part of this network. Now, there is so much more going on, but those are positive examples of what's happened. And I just want to share one more thing and let you ask a follow-up, but I feel like this is very important. While these strikes in Syria may have been necessary based on international law and the discovery of chemical weapons, what I am saying is since 9/11, because we have not identified the threat, and in my experience going around the country briefing FBI, National Joint Terrorism Task Force people, members of Congress, heads of committees like the Intel Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, none of whom have any awareness of the Muslim Brotherhood network or Sharia. Now some do, because we've been now at this for well over 12 years. But there's still a gross lack of understanding. How can you launch any military operation when the country's involved? It would be different if you did it in some other country. It had nothing to do with the Islamic movement or the jihad, but this is Syria, and we launched attacks many months ago and then just this past week into Syria without having any idea of the impact in the broader war. And that's because we still don't understand. And again, good news is H.R. McMaster, the former National Security Advisor, who actually is grossly ignorant on the threat, is out, and somebody who does understand the threat, Ambassador John Bolton, is in. So that's kind of a starting point maybe for the discussion.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, is kind of set the framework here, because we're going to move next to the Marxist Muslim Brotherhood connection, and it's actually a little bit broader and a lot longer ranging than just some recent years that this red-green axis has been fomented, has been intentionally created, and has infiltrated the United States of America. Now, on this show, we've talked quite a bit about the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I made the Dirty Dozen list years ago on the Southern Poverty Law Center and kind of discounted that organization a long time ago. But now they're really kind of teaming up with Antifa and the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think this is a unique set of circumstances here in America that our listeners don't know about. And so if you could kind of lay the groundwork and talk about this kind of new permutation on the threat.
Well, this is that's a great question. Well, what we have been seeing is that the jihadis, suit-wearing jihadis, if you will, the Muslim Brotherhood leadership in the United States has been working for several years with the Marxist movement in the United States. Communist Party USA, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, all of their subsidiary organizations that include, obviously, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the violent groups, as well as the subversive organizations. And so they fund these groups like Indivisible and things like that, so that when we go to places, you get 50, paid protesters. Actually, there's a great story when I was in Kansas, 10 months ago. They came out and protested, and I snuck out of the building I was in and kind of walked into the crowd and acted like I didn't know what was going on. They had no idea who I was. And I just said, "What's going on?" They're like, "Oh, some guy's here. He's mean." I'm like, "Well, what does he say?" They didn't know what I said. They didn't even know my name. They had never read Sharia or Islamic doctrine. And I essentially just asked, "Well, how do you know that he's wrong if you've never heard what he said and you don't know what the topics that he's talking about?" And they were left speechless. And then, of course, the head of the program spotted me and were like, "Are you John Guandolo?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And but it just totally blew their cover. They're just full of crap. And so the point is, these are paid Marxist tools. And it doesn't mean that everyone that was there is a Marxist. There could have been zero Marxists there, but they're just paid fools for a hostile movement, which is the Marxist movement. And we know that the jihadi, for instance, in that case in Kansas, it was the local Muslim Brotherhood mosque that energized them to get out to the street. Just like, a week ago when I was out in the Midwest, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. It was CARE working with the Southern Poverty Law Center that energized, their surrogates at Antifa to make phone calls to the hotels and the venues and say, if you don't shut this down, we, Antifa, are coming out. And everybody knows when Antifa comes out, things get set on fire, people get hurt, and plenty of property gets broken. Destroyed. So these are tacit and also real threats to businesses and to citizens to shut down free speech. And of course, in these cases, people caved. But that's not the only way they do it, but that's one way they do it. And I will say, as a broader, longer term, when things go very violent here in the United States, and that is coming, although that will be secondary to the violence in Europe, meaning the massive violence in Europe that's coming, it will be initiated here, in my estimation, by the Marxist movement, by the left movement, political left, primarily, and that will start the disintegration of order here, and then the jihadis will take action as they see fit. But it's a bigger discussion, but they don't want to do that yet. They want to use America as a platform to take down Europe first. But this is how they do it, and we see it in all over Ferguson, in Charlotte, in New York. We see Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood operatives on the ground working with the left organizations.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. We have these revolutionary Marxist communist organizations like Antifa, a very long history of this stuff, going back actually to the 1930s in some branches of it. How closely are they working with the jihadis in the Muslim Brotherhood in America? I think that's something that many Americans are like, these are civic organizations, John. We don't need to really worry about that. You're just blowing this out of proportion. But the fact that their leadership is working together, I think, is a significant change. And also, what can a normal average citizen do to fight back against that?
Okay, so it works at a bunch of different levels, but you've got from a couple of years ago, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States, and this is UTT's Understanding the Threats Assessment. Nihad Awad, who's the leader of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which the U.S. government has identified as Hamas in the United States. Their leader, we assess also being the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States, Nihad Awad, said at a Muslim Brotherhood conference in Chicago a couple years ago, Black Lives Matter is our matter, their campaign is our campaign. And then you have the Black Lives Matter and others on the street defending jihadis openly, like in New York, speaking out, saying we're all the same. You know, the cause of Palestine is our cause, meaning the Marxists saying that. So we've got plenty of national level and street level ties, not the least of which is the funding channels. You've got George Soros just pouring money into these groups like Black Lives Matter and others that are working directly with these jihadi groups. And we can go back into the early 2000s after the war started in Iraq, where you've got groups like Answer, hard left, Soros-funded, Act Now, Stop War, End Racism, leftist groups signing, protest permits with known Muslim Brotherhood groups. So this goes back. I mean, we've got all the evidence is not the problem. To your question, with all this going on and Americans realizing things are disintegrating much quicker than they thought, I mean, look, they're challenging the validity of the presidency himself. When we had the Islamic Association of Hawaii, the plaintiffs against the president when he wrote the executive order about limiting immigration in the United States from certain countries, that was the direct challenge to the President of the United States by the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Islamic Association of Hawaii is a Muslim Brotherhood entity. And I provided that evidence to both reporters and people in the government at the time it went on. But that's how bold they are. So what can the average American do? Well, it goes down to what we have been saying all along. This war is going to be won or lost the same way this president got elected, which is at the local and the county level. It's don't worry about how are we going to fix the FBI, how are we going to fund the military, all that stuff. I would not spend much time on that. I would spend time on where are the Marxists and the jihadi organizations in my county. Why are my police officers, my police leaders not doing anything? And the answer is simple: they don't know. And I can talk about that in a moment. Focus on your Chamber of Commerce. Why are they working with groups that have direct ties to terrorists? Many of them are. The interfaith outreach in your county, to your churches in your county, because the interfaith outreach is controlled by who? The Muslim Brotherhood. International Institute for Islamic Thought, legal documents in the largest terrorism financing trial, demonstrates their Muslim Brotherhood. CARE, which is Hamas, and in some cases, ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, identified as part of that same movement. And those are the ones running this interfaith outreach in a massive propaganda campaign. And they say in their own documents that the whole reason they're outreaching is to subvert the churches and the synagogues. And I would argue that's what they're doing, to turn Christians against Christians. You've got Christians out there saying Islam's peace, and other Christians who have actually just looked at, 10 minutes worth of Sharia and said, not sure what you're talking about. There's only one Quran. There was only one Prophet Muhammad. Very clear. And as a matter of fact, I am sitting here, I was just working on, before this interview, I've got the most widely used textbook in U.S. Islamic schools open because I got the newest version. And so I have my old copy and the new one. I'm just kind of going through it. And what's interesting is what it says in that book that they teach 7th grade Muslims in the United States, the most widely used 7th grade textbook to teach children about Islam, Muslims about Islam. It says exactly the opposite of what Islamic leaders tell the non-Muslim community, Christians, senators, business leaders, law enforcement. It's exactly opposite what they're telling us. So they're teaching their children one thing, and the direct opposite of that is what they're telling us Islam is. Now, the question has to be asked, now, why would they do that? Because it's written for 7th graders. It's not very clear. For instance, this sentence right here, the duty of the Muslim citizens is to be loyal to the Islamic State, saying that 3 duties of Muslims is the call to Islam, jihad, and encouraging good and forbidding evil, good and evil as defined by Sharia. And when it talks about jihad, it says it's the act of physically confronting evil and wrongdoing, and says if you die in a jihad, you automatically go to paradise. That's what they're teaching seventh graders, which is, oddly enough, exactly what ISIS and Al-Qaeda say. And yet the same Islamic leaders in some cases that actually participate in writing that book publicly tell us the exact opposite. And I just put out a video the other day. If you go to YouTube and just type in Understanding the Threat and go to our channel, it's the first one that'll pop up. The most recent video I did is about a 29-minute video where I took an interview from a state legislator who's a jihadi, a Sharia-adherent Muslim, named Akayo Abdul Samad in Iowa, state legislator. And I just took his comments that he gave in his raw interview to the news reporter, and I broke him down and said, well, he's lying here, and let's lay it out. And he's wrong here. And oddly enough, this is what, I just went point by point. So the question is, why would a state legislator who's Muslim, who's a Sharia-adherent Muslim, say the exact opposite to a news reporter that they teach in Iowa in Islamic schools to their children? Is that not a fair question?
It's a very fair question. And I think it's the question that most Americans are asking, but everybody feels afraid to talk about publicly or to discuss publicly because they feel they're going to get ridiculed or they're going to get bludgeoned by the mainstream media. And I want to take this opportunity, John, very quickly, for people that do want to go to UTT or subscribe to the newsletter, where can they go?
So I encourage people to go to understandingthethreat.com. Do subscribe to the newsletter. We won't bombard you, normally a couple emails a week with articles. And you can go to our blog and read the past articles as well. Encourage you to go to YouTube, put in Understanding the Threat, subscribe to the channel. We are on Facebook at Understand the Threat. Twitter is UTT_USA, or just me, which is at John Guandolo, Guandolo. We have DVDs and books for sale on the website. Please, use those. But we also have free resources on the website that we know people find very helpful. We need certainly many more people to understand this threat. But I really want to reiterate, this is going to be won at the state and local level, this war. And we have got to get people at the county level to know law enforcement, where they understand the threats, the only organization giving police the tools to map out the jihadi network in their area and the investigative strategies to do something about it. And we're the only ones giving state leaders strategies to dismantle the networks at the state level. I think worrying about it at the national level right now, that time is long past. We've got to do it at the county level, so sheriffs and pastors are very important. We encourage you to reach out to UTT. Invite us into your church. Invite us in to do a 3-day law enforcement police program, military program, National Guard, brief business leaders, elected officials, whatever. But the time is now. And I think what you just said, people are afraid. You got to work through that. On the day, that this all comes down, you want to look in the mirror and say, well, I could have done something, but I was afraid I was going to get called a name and be made fun of publicly. Well, now your children are gone because they were killed, and this is not fear-mongering. This is a reality that's way beyond our doorstep right now. And I think the thing that shocks me is the total lack of a sense of urgency in this war. So I do encourage people to get involved, to speak boldly the truth, but you can only do that if you know it. So those are my thoughts on it. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and share with you. And I appreciate the fact that you are also speaking truth and being bold in this. We need you in this war.
Well, and John, we're going to work on getting you, we're still working on getting you out here to Spokane, and we will get you out here to one of our great churches here locally so that you can do that briefing to everybody and train people up, especially law enforcement, but also our local civic leaders and pastors. And just appreciate everything you're doing as well.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care and God bless. John Guandolo, president of Understanding the Threat, understandingthethreat.com. You can check out the blog there as well. Take a look at some of the documented cases, some of the videos they have of what the Marxists and jihadis are doing together now. And the latest in Des Moines, in America's heartland. Pretty interesting articles. I really try to follow these guys whenever I can because they have primary source documents, not just speculation. And so all the people out there that try to poo-poo it, oh, that's not true, oh, that can't be as bad as they're saying, they have the primary source documents, they get the videos, they show the compare and contrast, they show when they're lying, when they're not. And he does raise a fair question. Why would a state legislator who's a Sharia-adherent Muslim lie about some of these things? Why? Now, remember, at the very beginning of this show, I talked about Maskirovka. I talked about the little masquerade, the deception that is inherent with the KGB training, doctrine, practices that is still prevalent in Russian intelligence today. Still. And General Pachipa's book, Disinformation, which really documents the 4,000 agents the KGB sent into the Middle East in the 60s and 70s under Andropov and Khrushchev. Could it be that some of those tactics, techniques, and procedures are being used today? It sure certainly looks like it. And we as Americans need to open our eyes to the way the rest of the world actually works. And that there is truly evil in the world. There are intentional agendas to bring America down. And document after document that proves this, we shouldn't shy away from it. We shouldn't be afraid of the truth. We should understand the threat. Tell our friends and neighbors about it. This is Matt Shea. Thank you very much for listening. May God bless all of you, and may he make this generation the greatest one.